Alright guys, let's walk through how we can perform supervised image classification with QGIS. Now if you don't know what supervised image classification is, that's okay. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what it is. I'm not going to give you a definition here because I think it's more valuable to get into it and to learn it as we go. The first thing we need to do with QGIS, make sure you have it open like I do here, and then we need to install a plugin that will help us out a whole lot with this image classification. So go to Plugins, Manage and Install Plugins. Go to All Plugins here, and we're going to search for the Semi-Automatic Classification plugin, which you see here. So go ahead and install that plugin. It'll take just a minute to install here. It should be pretty quick. And there we have it. I'm going to close my plugins page here, my plugins window. And you can see it's added a few things. You'll notice here we have this SCP dock, and up here we have a couple of toolbars. Now I'm going to take this dock and I'm going to drop it on like this, and then drag it over like this, so that it takes that whole side panel there. If you don't see this, the way you can get it is you can go to View, you can go to Panels, and down here it's cut off the screen, but SCP dock is down there. The same thing if you don't have those toolbars, go to Toolbars, and the SCP toolbars are cut off down at the bottom, but they're down there. Just make sure the check mark is turned on for those, and you will have them. Now, the next thing we need to do is add some data. If you don't have data, I have videos and blog tutorials on how you can get satellite data for free. Those are linked to from the article that has directions for this, which is linked in the description. I'm not going to go over it. I'm just going to add in some data that I have. And those data are going to be in the data for my full remote sensing with QGIS course, which you can access in the description below. So I'll go to data, to my courses, remote sensing, data, and we're going to work with some Landsat 9 analysis ready data. And here, you can see I have data for these 7 Landsat bands. I'm going to select all 7 of those, and I'm going to drag them in here. Alright, so now I have these bands. I'm just going to minimize their symbology so we can see all of them a little more easily. Now that I have my data in here, I can create a band set for the semi-automatic classification plugin, or we'll call it SCP for short. So I can go up here on the top to SCP, and I can go to band set, and you can see here my single band list doesn't have anything in it. But I can click this refresh button, and it adds in all 7 of those bands. I can select all of those bands with this button here, or I can go in and select them individually by using the Control or the Shift button. And once I have them selected, I can click Add, and that adds them to band set number 1. Okay, so this band set is now created. Now what we need to do is we need to define some regions of interest that will help the algorithm determine how to classify land cover. This is where the supervised aspect of supervised classification comes in. We call it supervised classification because we are giving labels to the computer to determine what land cover classifications to make. The computer trains a model based on our supervised class inputs. Before we can do that, we're going to want to get a color image up here. That's really easy to do with SCP. I'm going to give it the band combination 4-3-2, which is red, green, blue for Landsat. And if I hit enter there, this is going to generate this virtual band set down here. Now when I drag this up to the top, you will see that I now have a color image that I can look at. Just like this. Now I can make this false color infrared, which I believe would be 543. And if we hit enter, you can see now that virtual band set has turned into this color infrared. Let's go back to 432. And now we have this color image. So now the thing we need to do is we need to make some regions of interest. These are our training labels that we'll use to train an algorithm. To do this, open up the SCP doc, click on the training input tab here, and we need to create a training input file. I'm just going to put this in my downloads, and I'm going to call this youtube.scp, which will automatically be added onto the end, and we will click save here to start that file. Now this file is going to contain all the information about the spectral signature of the regions of interest that we create. And once we have this file created, we can start adding regions of interest, which is very simple to do. I'm going to come up on the toolbar, and I'm going to click this button here, which will help me create a region of interest. So click on this button. Now you can see I have crosshairs here. So let's say that I want to create a region of interest for water, which is represented by this lake. I'm going to come down here. I'm just going to start left clicking to place vertices on a polygon. And I can create a region of interest here. And when I'm done, I right click and it completes that polygon. Now, once that polygon is complete, I want to come over here to the bottom left-hand corner of my SCP doc. You can see I have a macro class ID, MC ID, and a class ID. My macro class, I'm going to name water. I'll leave the ID as 1. My class ID, I'll leave as 1. And I will name this lake. And once I've done this, I'm going to come to this button down here that says Save Temporary ROI to Training Input. And this will save it to that input file and put a record in this list. So let's go ahead and click that. You can see that it's working on calculating the signature and saving. I'm just going to pause the video while this finishes. It might take just a minute. Okay, so you can see that my region of interest over here, or my macro class of water has been added with the class of lake that has been added down here. And now if I go back over to my layers, you'll see I have this YouTube layer that's been added that contains my ROIs. If I drag that to the top, you can see this region of interest displayed here. Okay, let's go do some more regions of interest. Go back to my doc. I'm going to do some more water while I have it pulled up here. I am going to come over to this location here where there's maybe an algal bloom, and I'm going to make a region of interest for water over here. And right click, and region of interest, we got that, or macro class ID is 1. I'm going to keep this class 1, I'm going to keep a lake, and I'm going to save that. Once again, I'll pause while this finishes. Okay, oh, and look, you can see that I made a mistake and I made that 3 instead of 1. That's okay, we'll do another lake one so I can show you the right way to do it. I'll just make one more polygon over here on this lake, right click, change this to 1, lake, water, and we will save it. Okay, so you can see that record was added and it has a macro class and a class ID of 1. We're going to classify based on macro class ID, so if I make mistakes on class ID, it's not a big deal. All right, now let's just come up here and let's get just some water class on this river. So I'm going to make a region of interest for this river here. And I'm going to make this class ID 2, call it river. Still macro class ID 1, and let's save that. All right, now let's go look for some other macro classes we can identify here. We could do some for agriculture. We could do some for kind of bare earth. If we look at some more of our image over here, you can see that we have some snow, and we have some forested areas. We have some more bare earth areas. So let's start and do some more like bare earth type of thing. So this is kind of like some kind of, I don't know, landslide or glacial outwash or something. We'll call this bare earth. It looks rocky. I could be wrong. It's not that important for this tutorial. So we're going to change this macro class to 2, and we'll change this to 4. And so this will be, we'll call it bare earth, and it looks like it's rocks. And we'll save that signature. All right, let's go find another location to work on. Let's come down here. We have some varying hues of land cover here. Let's kind of outline this brown one. It looks like it's probably soil. And it's bare earth. We'll put it in class 5 and we'll call it soil. And let's save that. While we're in this area, let's make another ROI, and we'll just assume that all this is soil, even though it could be shrubland. We don't have the data to really inform us, and so we'll just do our best. In a real situation, you would probably want to have some, you for sure would want to have some on-the-ground data to ensure that the classes you're making here line up with what's really being seen on the Earth's surface. We'll save that one also as soil. And this tutorial is really designed to give you an idea of how to do this as far as the technical side of it. There's also kind of the scientific method side of it, which would require you to have logical justifications in place for the data you're collecting. Now let's do one more bare earth, and we'll assume that this over here is rock also, which was class 4. And let's go ahead and save that. Okay, now let's go and get some agriculture here. So we'll start a new macro class for agriculture. Or maybe we'll just call it vegetated, actually, to simplify our classes. So we have some vegetation here. And we'll call this 3 vegetated. And we'll call this agriculture. In class 6, 3 vegetated agriculture. So those things look like we have those set up correctly, and we will save this. Okay, and let's find some vegetation that's maybe slightly different than that. Let's come up to this here, and we'll create another region of interest, and it will also be class 6, 3 vegetated, and we'll save that. And while this is saving, I'll just let you know that if you are interested in more in-depth tutorials on remote sensing with QGIS, I have a full course on this with over 4 hours of video instruction. It goes from downloading your own satellite data into accuracy analysis, and you can get that at a link in the website, or a link in the description. Okay, now let's go find some forest that's also vegetated, but might have a slightly different signature. And so we'll go over here into this more mountainous region, and we have some maybe more shrubby vegetation in this area. So let's go ahead and create an ROI for this. And we'll give this macro class 7, and we'll call this, maybe we'll just call this natural. It doesn't matter a lot. Like I said, we'll classify based on macro class ID. We'll just kind of keep this somewhat accurate here. And we'll get this saving. And let's just get one more class of forest here. Kind of maybe this dark, shadowy forest. And so we'll come in and select this area here. And we'll also name this class 7. Oh, I need to right click to close that. And then we'll save this signature. Now, one thing to know is I'm just going to do these 3 classes. When you're doing this for a real application, you'll want to have classes that represent the different nuances in land cover, because everything is going to be assigned to one of these classes. And if you noticed in this image, we have some snow. And if I only use 3 classes, it's not going to classify the snow accurately by any means because I haven't accounted for that with my class structure. So you want to make sure that when you're doing this in a real application setting, that you account for all those classes so that everything fits nicely into something. And this is from my printer. How lovely. Like I said, this is an example to show you how to do the technical side of this, but there's also kind of this logical scientific process side that takes a lot more background knowledge, especially of the area that you're working in. Okay, but we have all these ROIs set up. We've saved, the signatures have been saved to our data file, and now we can go in and actually train a model that's going to work on this for us. So the first thing we can do is we can go into SCP, band processing, and classification. And here we can change some settings. So you'll notice here that we have our input band set, which we had band set 1, so that's what we want. I can use MCID, which is what I want to do. You can also use class ID if you would like. And we have an algorithm, which is minimum distance, max likelihood, or spectral angle mapping. You can play around with these. I'm just going to show minimum distance for this example. I'm going to leave this unchecked for the land cover signature classification. We're okay here. And the classification output, we can load a style in here or apply a mask. We're just going to do this basic. And I'm not going to click run because I want to show you something that we can do to test our classification before we actually run it. And the way we can do that is by using this classification preview. Now what I want to do is, most of my ROIs are over on this side of the image. I'm going to come over to this other side of the image to see how well it classifies in an area that I haven't trained it on as much. So I'm going to click this preview button here. If I click on that, and I can come over here, and when I click on an area, it's going to generate a preview for me. And this will take just a minute for this preview to generate. But once it does, you can see here that it has indeed generated, and it's really hard to see what is going on, largely because my colors over here have not been set well. So I can change these colors by double-clicking on it, and I'll just change these macro class IDs. So water, I will change that to blue, and then bare earth can stay the same, and vegetated actually can also stay the same. So I can click this button now to refresh my preview. And this will take just a second to load up. And there we go. You can see that I have that water, vegetation, and bare earth classified. If I go to my layers panel, you can see that I have this temporary layer here that gives me those classifications and their colors. And I can turn this on and off to kind of verify how well my classification is doing. You can see that it's picking up water pretty well, but it's also picking up shadow as water in some places here, and the vegetation is turning out pretty well. Now I can go over and I can click this add button to try my classification in a new location. So if I want to click over here, I can center it on this urbanized area or slightly urbanized area and generate a new preview in that location. And we can see what that looks like. You can see that it picks up that river. And if we look at this urban area, you can see that it's a mix of vegetated and bare earth, which makes sense. And then you can see that it's picking up the vegetation and the soils relatively well in these other areas. And finally, once I feel good about my classification preview, if you test this preview in some places and don't like it, you can go in over here and add more classes, add more ROIs for each class, whatever you think you need to do to improve that classification. And once you have it ready, you can come in here to SCP, you can come into band processing, classification, and you can click run over here. And now when you click run, it's going to give you you need to set a file name, so I'll call this my YouTube classification, and I will save it. And this will take just a minute to run and to complete that classification. When it's done, it's going to come out and add that layer into QGIS, and it's going to be classified in the same manner as you set your colors for your classes in the SCP doc. And so remember, if you're interested in more about this, there are two avenues to learn that. There's the free avenue, which includes YouTube videos and posts on the blog. Many of those are linked in the article on my website, which is linked in the description. And there's also the remote sensing for QGIS course, which has a more tutorial guided option there. You can see here that this classification is about 50% done. We're still working on it, and it'll get done here in just a minute. Okay, so my classification has been added. I can close this window out and go over to my layers. I can remove this temporary layer now. And you can see that I have those three classes predicted over the entirety of my satellite image. And that is how you can perform an unsupervised classification with QGIS. If you're interested in other classification techniques, you can check out my videos on my video on unsupervised classification as well. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this helped you expand your knowledge of QGIS. If you have questions, you can always ask in the comments, and to learn more, check out the resources linked in the description. Thank you for watching.